I never imagined I would be the person to cancel a wedding just a few days before the ceremony. I always thought those stories were movie exaggerations or neighbor gossip, until I realized that life sometimes changes direction without warning. It all started on a Tuesday night when the dress was already fitted, the invitation sent, and the venue practically ready. I was on the living room sofa, staring at a seemingly endless to-do list, when Bruno came in with a tired expression, saying the beverage supplier had been delayed. He was talking, but I wasn't listening. I could only see the movement of his mouth, the way he ran his hand through his hair, the dark circles under his eyes. It was the same man I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with, but for some reason, in that moment, he seemed like a stranger. "Are you okay?" he asked, noticing my silence. I hesitated a little before answering and finally said, "I'm fine, just tired." But it wasn't tiredness. It was something else, deeper, older, like a suspicion I had been holding on to that finally found a way out. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about how we had gotten to this point. Bruno and I had been together for 6 years, 3 of them living under the same roof. In the beginning, it was easy, light, full of plans and promises, but over time, we adjusted too much to each other, like furniture squeezed into a tight space. Each of us gave a little, and before I knew it, I no longer knew what was mine and what was his. That's why the decision to marry started to feel like an obligation, not a choice. The next day, my mother called to ask if I had taken care of the guest favors. I said yes, even though I hadn't done anything. She noticed my voice sounded off and said, "Honey, you're nervous, right?" "That's normal." I wanted to say, "It's not nervousness, Mom, it's fear," but I stayed quiet. On Thursday, I met my friend Louisa for coffee. She looked at me and asked directly, "Are you really happy, Anna?" I almost choked. "Of course I am," I lied, laughing. She didn't believe me. "You've always been grounded. If you were sure, you wouldn't be like this." That echoed in my mind. I went back home with a sense of urgency, as if I had to make a decision before the world swallowed me whole. That night, Bruno arrived late. I was on the balcony when he came up behind me and hugged me. The gesture was affectionate, but it made me want to cry. "Everything set for Saturday?" he asked. I took a deep breath and said, "I don't think so." He laughed, thinking I was talking about the party details, but when he saw my expression, he stopped. "What do you mean?" I stayed silent for a few seconds. The sound of the street seemed distant. "Bruno, I don't know if I want to get married." He stepped back slowly, like someone trying to understand if they heard correctly. "Are you joking?" "No." The conversation that followed was long and confusing. He asked if there was someone else, if I was having regrets, if it was fear. I could only say, "It's not you, it's what we've become." He fell silent, then left. I stayed there, staring at the closed gate, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. I spent the night awake, trying to write a message to the guests, the planner, my family. No words seemed enough. The next morning, I went to my mother's house. When I opened the door, she looked at me and knew. I started crying before I even spoke. "You're not getting married, are you?" she asked. I nodded slightly. She hugged me tightly without judgment. Then it's because it wasn't meant to be now. The following days were a whirlwind. Calls, messages, curious glances. People always want a concrete explanation, but what I felt couldn't fit into short sentences. I loved Bruno, calmly and sincerely, but not enough to promise forever. Sometimes love exists, but it doesn't carry the weight of real life. 2 weeks later, he sent me a message saying he was trying to understand, that it still hurt, but he forgave me. I cried reading it because the hardest part wasn't ending things. It was admitting to myself that love changes, and insisting would betray something that no longer existed. It's been almost a year since that day. I still have the dress stored in the closet, and I'm not sure why. Maybe to remind myself that courage also means knowing when to let go. Sometimes people ask if I regret it, and I say no. I've learned that some endings are just beginnings in disguise.